All right, it's time for the gateway skip tutorial. I've said for a while now that I want to make one of these, and I've just been dragging my feet on it, and I'm finally going to get it done. So there is an existing tutorial for gateway skip that shows an older method that was used back when people first started doing it. And since then, a couple of new methods for it have been found that are significantly more consistent. So I want to mention right off the bat that this is not the optimal version of this skip. Technically speaking, there is a slightly faster version, maybe like a second faster. However, you're going to be sacrificing like most of your consistency at it. I would say it's about a third as consistent as this one, if that. So I personally don't think it's worth it. There are some runners who do the faster version, but in my opinion, if you have the choice, you shouldn't learn it. I want to also preface this by saying that this is not a beginner-friendly strategy. This is not even really an intermediate-friendly strategy. I would recommend only learning gateway skip if you're going for like 219 in any percent Luigi or 529 in 120 star. Remember that you can always add it later, or just go for it on like bad gateway starts so you can reset less to bunnies. But if you add it too early, before you're really good enough at it to add the trick, you're gonna suffer from it. It doesn't save that much time. Like, it's maybe 15 seconds. And it sounds tempting, but it's one of those tricks that will make early game very frustrating if you're not good at it. For reference, at my peak consistency with gateway skip, I would say I get it 19 out of 20 attempts. It is extremely consistent, but that's because I've practiced it. If you don't practice it, you're not gonna be able to do it consistently in runs, and it's gonna become very, very frustrating to reset to. As someone who added it too early, I always caution people about this because I think it's really important to mention that it's far from necessary to get a good time. So because this is an advanced tutorial, I'm going to be assuming that you already know the basics of the movement and the controls and stuff. I'm not going to be explaining that stuff. If you don't understand what I'm talking about in terms of movement and controls, then you're probably not ready to learn this skip. So first of all, I kind of want to talk about how gateway skip actually works. So gateway skip works by doing what's called a mega triple jump, which is where you land on a planet or planetoid or surface with a specific collision relative to the camera. And if you land on a sort of surface that is sloped away from you, and just before you jump for the third time, you briefly go neutral on the control stick, you will get a glitched triple jump that goes significantly higher than you are supposed to be able to go. So because of this, there are 3 important things to keep in mind that make this trick work. The first is your position. You need to be in the right spot. The second is your camera angle. You need to have the correct camera angle. And the third is how long you hold A for the first 2 jumps in the triple jump, because that will also affect your position. Another thing you're gonna want to keep in mind is the timing of your 2P jump after you do the triple jump. So with all that out of the way, let me describe first the actual execution of the trick, and then I'll talk a little bit about troubleshooting and what might be going wrong if you are messing it up. So, when you land on this planet, some people like to go for an insta-walk. I personally find it to be trickier for me to consistently set up gateway skip if I don't do an insta-walk, or if I do an insta-walk, so I choose instead to go for a slow-ish camera cancel. I don't really delay it like intentionally, but I don't try to whip it out as fast as I can either. Something to note is this Goomba right here sometimes can be like here. When you're flying to the Starship planet, you can try to freeze this Goomba to make it not randomly wander over here. If the Goomba is in the way, you can freeze it with 2P and just kind of walk against it and squeeze past it, and you can still get gateway skip. It's just harder because you have less of a it's less comfortable to set up the trick. So when you land on this planet, you just want to hold straight up until you reach this dark brown ring right here. When you reach the inner edge of that ring, that's when you start your first jump, and that's also when you change to hold a direction other than up. The direction you want to hold is slightly between up and upright if you have notches. And I can't really describe the direction because not only is it not a notch direction, but it's also not exactly the same every time. The way that I like to think about this is that I want to get as close as possible to this cage with the Luma in it without bumping up against it and losing my speed. So you can see here that when I do this, I'm just barely scraping right by this cage. It's got a slightly bigger hitbox than it looks like. Sometimes Luigi's like fist will hit the cage and he'll slow down. So that is kind of will help you sort of maintain the correct angle, as if you think about it that way. At least that's what works for me. So the timing of these jumps is you want to tap jump for both of them, but the main thing you want to kind of think about is you want to land fully on this flat part after the first jump. So you don't want to be landing on this corner. You want to land on the flat part, kind of far in to the flat part so that you don't land on this corner right here when you land the third jump or the second jump. Then you want to land your third jump right about here. It's not super positionally precise, but doing it the same way every time will help with your consistency. So run up, hold that angle, and then that's the mega triple jump. Now to do the mega triple jump, you can go neutral on the analog stick. I don't know anybody who does it that way, because if you hold the button that centers the camera, which on Wii is the C button, and on 3D All-Stars, I believe by default it's bound to L1. It doesn't really matter because you can rebind that if you find it uncomfortable. So I'm just going to call it the C button because it's an easier shorthand. If you hold that button, you can't move. It disables your control stick inputs. So tapping that button is equivalent to letting go of the stick and then really quickly pressing it again. So what I do here is continue holding the direction on the stick. At some point I switch to up. That's just kind of a feel thing. I can't really explain how to do that. It's sort of just something that I have an intuition for, and I think it's kind of slightly different depending on the exact timing of your jumps. But the important thing is to tap the C button right before you press the A button to do the third jump and the triple jump. So I sort of think of it like a rhythmic CA, CA, CA. And that timing usually gets a mega triple jump. Another thing that you want to make sure to do is press the A button early. You want to buffer this jump. You want to jump like here so that Luigi jumps as soon as he touches the ground. Because if you wait too long after he touches the ground, you won't get the mega triple jump. And then the last thing that's important is you want to wait until the peak of your triple jump. So when Luigi does a triple jump, he does this animation where he kicks his legs in the air. And what I like to do is wait for that animation to stop and then do my 2P jump. And of course, you want to make sure to hold A on the 2P Wii remote, because otherwise your 2P jump will go lower. And sometimes that makes a difference. Depending on the exact timing of the C press relative to the A press, you will get a higher or lower mega triple jump. All mega triple jumps are not created equal. Some of them are really, really high. In fact, you can get one that's so high you don't even need to do a 2P jump, but you should always do the 2P jump. And you can get one that's just barely high enough to make it into the gravity field. The important part is that you can't make it with a normal triple jump, obviously. So in terms of troubleshooting, there are two things that I like to think about that are the most consistent patterns for me in terms of timing the C press. I find that if I time the C press too early, I will get either a low mega triple jump or no mega triple jump. Luigi will just do a normal triple jump. That usually means I pressed C too early. Sometimes it means I pressed A too late, but I press A really early for this trick most of the time, so usually that means I pressed C too early, or C and A together, I pressed them too early. It's kind of like a game of chicken, as far as I can tell, where the later you press the C button, the higher your mega triple jump will go, but you don't want to press it too late, because if you press it too late, you won't get one. The distinguishing factor between pressing the C button on time and too late is that, again, this is from my personal experience, I find if I press it too late, the camera will center behind Luigi, which is a good indicator that you pressed it too late. Sometimes it will center behind Luigi even if you get the mega triple jump, but if you get a normal triple jump or no triple jump at all, and the camera centers behind Luigi, it probably means that you pressed C too late. Now, there is kind of, I think it's a bit of a misconception about this trick. You don't need to hold the C button. You only need to tap it. So I just tap C and then hit A. I don't hold the C button, and I'm not pressing C at all while I'm doing the triple jump. The C press is entirely before the A press. And that is kind of relevant because I think some people think that you need to like do a neutral triple jump and then press the stick, and that's not the case. At least, again, not in my own personal experience with this trick. The other kind of thing that is worth pointing out is that if you miss this, you can actually go back to this point and try again. But it's not the same because the camera angle won't be exactly the same as when you come out of this launch start. So my best advice is to use these two rivets on the darker brown part to line up with the exact point where Luigi kind of touches the ground here. And then go to about here and try to find a camera angle that looks similar-ish by just facing this way, facing down, and tapping the C button to center the camera. You can kind of try to use this crystal like the angle and position of the camera relative to this crystal right here to try and tell exactly where you are, or you can try to use this pipe up here to try and tell where you are, and then you can just hold up and try the setup again, and if you're lucky, it will work, but I wouldn't count on it. What perfectly fine backup is to just fall down, talk to the Luma, kill the Goomba, and get the key like normal. It won't lose you much time over just not going for it. So just to recap, you want to run forward, jump at an angle where you're barely grazing the cage, tap C and tap A, and delay your 2P jump so that you land in the gravity field. And then the movement after the skip itself is relatively self-explanatory. It is worth noting that you land in a different spot than if you take the Sling star, so that's worth paying attention to. But other than that, it is pretty much exactly the same. And in fact, it's actually kind of easier because you have a better angle to shoot that crystal with a star bit here. So one thing to always keep in mind with this trick is that it's very, very practice and timing dependent. It's sensitive, it's finicky. It is really consistent once you get good at it, but there's no shortcut to getting good at it. Knowing what you're doing is half the battle, but the other half is practicing it. You're not going to be able to just try this and instantly get good at it. You're going to need to put in a little bit of time. And unfortunately, it might be frustrating to practice because if you're playing on the 3D All-Stars version, you can't die to respawn on the Starship planet because there's a checkpoint right here. So I would actually, this is like one of the few tricks that I think it's actually preferable to practice it on emulator if you don't have, if you're not playing on the Wii version and you don't have practice codes, because this is, unless you want to play like the first 2.5 minutes of the level every single time you want a single attempt at this trick, because it's so dependent on the camera and the angle that you're facing when you land on this planet and the exact position of the camera, it's, in my opinion, very important that you fly in from this launch star every time, and it's just kind of a harsh reality of the situation that that's just how it is. So that's kind of another reason that I don't necessarily recommend everybody learns this or goes for it, because it can be really frustrating to practice if you don't have access to some kind of shortcut. But if you want to learn this trick and you get consistent at it, then by all means feel free to implement it whenever you want. But my main recommendation is, just like a lot of things in this game, you don't want to get overzealous about it and try to go for it before you're really ready to, because that's probably not going to be advantageous in full game runs when you are resetting a lot in an already pretty brutal early game, especially in 120 star where it's 5.5 hours long and it doesn't really matter if you're saving or losing the 10-15 seconds from gateway skip. So that's the guide. Hopefully this was helpful. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments of this YouTube video so that other people can also see your questions and hopefully get answers.